Welcome back to the show. With the whole world standing still and people losing their jobs and livelihoods left and right, we knew it would be important to discuss workers' compensation and the unemployment climate. Here to give us the insight we need is attorney Charles E. Wolf. Charles E. is a local attorney who specializes in workers' compensation. Charles E., welcome to the show.
Thank you, John.
All right, we have a few questions, so let's get right to it. One of the questions from one of our viewers says, am I eligible for workers' compensation if I contracted COVID in the course of my work?
Well, that's an interesting question, and we are in uncharted territories now, as we all know. It really depends upon whether this person is a frontline worker, because just anyone can contract this airborne illness, but frontline workers, nurses, doctors, hospital staff, cleaning, EMTs, grocery store clerks are all basically considered frontline workers at this point. So possibly you would be entitled to benefits. There's nothing specific in the law right now. Everything depends upon the facts and circumstances surrounding the job, the employer. What actually did you contract? Did you contract the virus with no symptoms? Do you have any sequela, or what are the damages? So it's a very complex system. It could be an occupational injury, or it could simply fall under the definition of an accident under the workers' compensation system.
Right. So let me, just to be sure that we are explaining it more broadly for those people who have not had to go into the workers' compensation world and pursue a claim. Just because you get infected doesn't mean that you have a work comp claim. If you got exposed to the virus but you didn't actually get sick and you're able to keep working, let's say, you may not have a claim at all. To be eligible for a workers' compensation claim, you have to be rendered unable to work for some period of time. If you're made sick because of a condition on the job, then the employer may have to pay for your medical treatment. And if it's as a result of the job, and proving that you got sick from the virus, you mentioned people who are working in an environment where we know the COVID virus is, and it's more easy to prove it in that case. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, you're talking about people who can prove, if they were infected with the virus, that they got sick from being in a job that is more likely than not the virus happened on the job, as opposed to from a family member who got sick, let's say, and that it affected their ability to work, and it required them to miss work for some period of time. Is that a fair restatement of what you said?
It's fair, except to the extent you can still have a workers' compensation claim without missing employment. For example, it could be a medical-only claim.
Okay.
And we don't know the ramifications of what this disease is bringing to us. We don't know if it's simply a one-time exposure and you're fine after that. We don't know about any neurological problems that could be developed. There brain injury, loss of taste and smell. Some people are having strokes. We really don't know at this point.
Okay. All right.
Fact intensive.
Right, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but you're right. And some people, they get infected and the boss sends them home, even if they feel pretty good. The boss has to worry about other people getting infected, and so they may not be able to come to work because of the infection. So, but let's move on to the next question, shall we? Can an employer fire an employee if the employer believes that the employee has contracted the virus?
I think that would be a very unwise move for any employer at this point in time. I think the ramifications from the OWC and the DOL will be great. Okay?
OWC and DOL, tell people what that means.
Department of Labor, I'm sorry. Both on the federal and the state level. There are protections in place. There's the Family First Act, which specifically delineates which employers are allowed to take what action, and everything is geared towards protecting the families and protecting the employers. To really answer that question, again, I'm not trying to waffle, but everything is fact intensive in workers' comp, even more so now because of the federal regulations. But the Family First Act protects employees, and it depends upon which category that employer falls into.
Okay. Next question. Can an independent contractor file a workers' comp claim if they contract the virus, the COVID virus?
Again, it depends on the definition of an independent contractor. We fought this for years. A lot of employers want to call their employees independent contractors. And as you know, there are certain things that distinguish an independent contractor. So simply, if it is a true independent 1099 independent contractor who receives that 1099 form, and they're responsible for all of their cost, and they basically do the job and are free and are not under the direction and control of the employer, then no, they have to file their own claim. If they have, which they should, workers' compensation insurance, then yes, of course they can file a claim.
So if you are an independent contractor and you have to pay yourself out of the money that you bill others, you should have your own workers' compensation insurance. That's your own safety net. And if you don't have your own workers' comp insurance and you are an independent contractor, you may be in a tough spot in this situation.
That is true. And by law, you do have to have workers' comp.
Okay. Next question. I believe my employer put me in harm's way by exposing me to the coronavirus. Can I sue the employer? Now, this is one you and I both could probably weigh in on, but I want to hear your response to that.
Well, there has been a lawsuit filed by a Walmart worker who contracted the virus and died. His family filed that lawsuit. I think that it really, again, depends upon the facts and circumstances. But just to give you an example, if there is an employer who knows that someone has coronavirus and insists that that person come to work, for example, or insists that the other employees come to work, then yes, I think you're going to be looking at what we call personal injury or tort suits in Louisiana. I don't think there's going to be any way around that. It's an intentional tort to put your employees in harm's way, especially in light of the shutdown and the regulations that John Bel Edwards has in place, Governor Edwards. So I think employers need to be really careful. There's going to be a lot of ramifications for the frontline workers, again, who are wearing garbage bags, who don't have the personal protective equipment. Even just going back to somebody who mops the floors in a hospital, they need to be protected. Yeah. It's an airborne virus.
Yeah, and you bring up a couple of really good points, and just because as a personal injury attorney and my firm is, we're affected in a lot of ways because thank goodness there are fewer cars on the road. That means there's less accidents. But for those heroes who go into work willingly, knowing there's going to be a lot of sick patients likely infected with the virus, and they put their own lives at risk, knowing that they have children who will be impacted, devastated if the nurses, the doctors, even those janitorial staff who go into those hospitals and have to clean up and disinfect. But I believe too that if you have to work in a place where lots of the public is entering, even if it's a grocery store, and you believe that infected people are in there, and you get sick, you may well have not only a workers' comp claim if you get sick and you can't work, or if you get sick, you may have a personal injury claim or a tort suit, like you said. And God forbid you find yourself in that tough situation. My recommendation is you should consult with an attorney, such as Ms. Wolf, or someone who does what I do, personal injury. So next question. My employer required me to, I think we asked that question. My employer, I think let's go to the next question. What if a family member contracted the virus in the course of work and died as a result? I think we kind of covered that, but any comment on that real quick, Charles Lee?
If the family member is a dependent of the person who is deceased from COVID, yes, there is certainly a claim. It really just, again, it depends upon whether the person who is deceased is married or has children, and if the answer to that is no, and they don't have any dependents, then any funds from that death would go to the parents. But yes, they definitely can have a claim.
Okay, and I would just add to that, sometimes there is a personal injury claim, and same thing, if that person has any living relations, then a claim can be brought by blood relations, and if there was negligence that exposed that person to that virus, somebody needlessly was exposed to that dangerous virus, there may be a claim for personal injury. So next question. How does somebody file for unemployment if they have been laid off or fired because of the virus, and how long does it take to get unemployment benefits? Charles, not exactly your area, but you may have some help you can provide in responding to that question.
Well, I think that if somebody has been fired, they definitely need to apply for unemployment. There's two types of unemployment now currently. You can file, if you're fired, you can file for unemployment. You can also file for the pandemic unemployment for those who may not have been, they could be an independent contractor, somebody who is a true independent contractor, or somebody who's a freelancer, for example, and they could get benefits because these are unusual times and it's a lot easier. Governor Edwards has now reduced the waiting period. There's no requirement to file for a job every week. And so yes, those benefits are available.
Excellent. And on that note, we do have a CPA, a financial advisor, who's going to be joining us in the next segment to talk in more detail about the different types of financial support that come from the CARES Act and other financial means. But moving on to the next question. What about those who were fired? I think let's move on to the next question if I could. Can gig workers or independent contractors file for unemployment if they wouldn't have been fired or laid off other than because of the pandemic, but merely lost access to clients? Can you answer that question?
Yes, they can, and I believe that they can and they should. If they don't qualify for regular unemployment benefits, again, the pandemic benefits are comparable, and they can obtain those benefits. And how soon they're coming out, the state has hired additional workers. I know they're working on that. They've transferred some of the staff to now handle those excess unemployment claims. So they definitely need to file and file as soon as possible.
Okay. And it looks like we have time for one more question. My employer is not considered an essential service, so they should be closed, but they are defying the state's order and remaining open and say I should have to come into work. What should I do? Asked this person.
Again, it depends upon the type of employment. There's not one answer for every single thing. Okay. The law is a little gray in some areas, and this is one. It depends on who the employer is. Is it an employer who employs more than 500 people? Is it less than 500 people, but more than 50 people or 25 people? That depends. You know, in this case, I think that the Family First Act provides protection. We have an enhancement now to FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, so that people who are afraid, and frankly, we're under a shelter-in-place act in Louisiana, at least in certain parishes. You know, we're not yet open. So I don't believe that a worker who falls under any of the categories illuminated under this revised Corona Family Medical Leave Act would have to go to work. And I think that, again, depending upon the employer, their job would be protected. And I don't think people, obviously the employer is in dangerous territory if they're opening up their employees to being, you know, contracting COVID-19. It really just depends upon what their job is. But they have protections in place. The federal government, Department of Labor, has put in place protections for those workers so that they don't have to go to their job. They can care for their family member. One of the exemptions so far is for parents whose children have young children who are not in school. the nurseries are closed, the schools are closed. Families first, right? So, no, they don't have to go to work.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. But that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Charles E.